All right, here we go. So we're going to talk tonight about trying to set up everybody for buying a home, their first home, and especially from the standpoint of how family can help a first-time home buyer who thinks that they simply can't make this happen. We get so much of that these days where people just think that they physically can't buy a house. And so what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk about some of the challenges that they're going to be facing throughout the process. We're going to go through a first-time homebuyer workshop on it, but we're going to talk about some of the pain points that the vast majority of the younger generation is doing and that they're running into when it comes to buying a home. And then we're going to talk about how to pay it forward so that we can help them achieve this dream of home ownership, whether it's through giving them a hand or at least guiding them into the right information. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and share screens, and then we're going to go and talk about the details of how to get this set up so that everybody can understand where we're headed with this. So here we go. Now, this is an open conversation evening, so if you have questions along the way, you're more than welcome to go ahead and ask those as we go along. That way we can go ahead and get you set up with whatever you might have. We'll have a couple pauses throughout the night as well to try to answer any questions you might have. So the first thing on tonight's agenda is really going to be set up trying to understand the process. And so in today's agenda, we're going to talk about getting ready and what the community needs to do in order to be able to help themselves get ready for it, and then also get set up for success when it comes to buying a home. And in the getting ready part, we're going to talk about budgeting and a couple other things like that. Then we're going to talk about the steps to buying a home. And then finally, but not completely done, but we're going to talk about market and where the market is currently. We're going to bring out some statistics, show you what's happening with the interest rate market and kind of what to expect for this coming year when it comes to buying this next home. Now, this is a pretty big deal, so we want to make sure that you strap in. We'll kind of get going. And so getting ready, part of the piece with getting ready, especially for the younger generation, is they're getting a lot of bad information when it comes to how to make something like this work. They're getting this information from TikTok, they're getting it from Instagram, they're getting it from a variety of places. It doesn't really matter where they're getting it from, but they're getting a lot of bad information on how to get set up to buy this home for themselves. And they're really leaning into what is popular on TikTok right now, which anything or TikTok or any of the social mediums, which is really that a lot of bad news ends up selling better than good news. And so the real thing that we want to make sure that we're talking about and setting people up for tonight is that we allow them the opportunity to understand that real estate is a cycle and that this cycle will change with time. And the best thing that any client can do or any aspiring homeowner can do is to get ready. Now, this sounds like it's completely counterintuitive, but there's a big issue right now with schools not necessarily teaching the younger crowd how to understand financial principles. And so, one of the most important things that we can do when we're getting our children or grandchildren, or we're encouraging them to get ready to buy a home, is help them understand how to set up a spending plan. Now, a lot of people refer to it as a budget. But this is an incredibly important piece because most of the stuff in school these days, they're just telling you how to figure out math. They're telling you how to figure out certain things with it, but they're really not setting you up for success, trying to help you understand how to get a spending plan in place. Another thing that is really important with this spending plan is helping them understand the economics of value and the economics of credit, and understanding also how a debt load can actually influence future decisions and their opportunities to be able to pull this off. Now, sometimes this is hard to do because the longer you wait to teach kids or the younger crowd, how to get set up for these items, the harder it is for them to actually get it set up. And I'm going to tell you that I'm just as guilty in this area. I know that my daughter, when she came to me and she was getting ready to buy a house, she started saying, "Hey, I don't know what I'm doing with this stuff." And I realized, oh yeah, you're right. You don't know what you're doing with budgeting. You don't know what you're doing with this. I do it every day of the week, but I didn't get taught in school either. And so I had to go through the process of trying to understand how to best relay that information to my adult children at this point so that I could get them set up for success and get them set up for buying this home. And this was really, really a challenge. I am going to tell you, it was really a challenge because I had to go through the process of helping them understand not just what their gross income was, but help them understand how the taxes were done, how the life insurance and homeowners insurance and health insurance and all these different places played into them, and then understanding what's left and how to create a budget based off of fixed expenses and then also variable expenses. And the hardest one to control, especially for, I mean, I remember this when I was younger, the hardest one to control is really the variable expenses and the entertainment expenses because we all want to get out and we all want to have fun. And so that was always the bigger problem when it came to these pieces. But I can't tell you how important it is to really help the younger crowd understand the need for budgeting. And that can be, there are a variety of games out there that you can use that are designed specifically for budgeting. I know that Kiyosaki has one out there that he calls the cash flow quadrant game, and you can actually pull that one up. You can buy it. It is a little expensive. You can get them used though, and those games are actually pretty tremendous. They're like a hybrid of Monopoly, and it actually works extremely well because you have to learn how to manage credit and you have to learn how to manage your budget and then also your debt load. Now, the big deal with this conversation about helping the younger crowd get ready is really going to come down to a timeline. And they're going to need some support with this because what we're seeing with the younger crowd is because they're being influenced with a lot of the social mediums right now, the social mediums are telling people that it's not wise for them to go out and buy a home because rents are cheaper because of X, Y, and Z when it's a national statistic, an interesting statistic that homeowners are 30 times have 30 times more net worth than an average person who rents. And so this is something that is going to take a little bit of education to try to help them understand it, but not everybody's meant to be a homeowner. And so understanding how to filter out some of these bad pieces of information and guide them down the process of creating stability is going to be extremely important. And they're going to need your support in doing this. Now, one of the ways to help them with support is to guide them along the steps of what we have to do in order to get them set up for a pre-approval. Now, pre-approvals or buying a home, regardless of if you buying your first home or you bought 20 homes before, it really doesn't matter. It still comes down to the same three items: credit, income, and assets. Credit's what's going to open the door, and it's going to tell us, if you have the, willingness and ability to repay. Income is going to be what we look at to see if you know how to manage your debts and if you know how to manage your money and how much home that you can get qualified for. And then assets is a big one. And this is where I struggle. I'm going to tell you my story. When I bought my first house, I struggled with this. You're just starting off, you're just getting married. And I bought my first home when I was like 24. And now I'm going to tell you that it sounds pretty exciting to say I bought it at 24 until you hear that I bought an abandoned house. The house was completely abandoned. Didn't have windows, didn't have doors. It literally didn't even have carpet, and it had graffiti all over the walls inside the house. And so I was buying literally a shell. I did it on purpose because I knew what I was doing to fix it up and I could do it. But the challenge is that I had no idea. I didn't have the resources to be able to buy anything other than that. Now, strategically, family can help set their kids up or set the next generation up by showing them how this works and how we can get them set up for success when it comes to buying a house. And it's a strategic importance that family do this. Now, when I fast forward my situation, I kind of started doing some of this early with my younger kids, which are adults now, and I started helping them understand the value of homes and the value of home ownership. And I'll tell you my story a little bit more in a second, but I don't want to get too far ahead of it. But the strategic placement of these conversations is going to be important. And it's going to be talking about freedom and it's going to be talking about other aspects when it comes to the younger crowd because they really do want their freedom, but they don't necessarily want to get tied down. But you at the same point in time, you need to help them understand that their credit, their income, and their assets are going to play a big role. And if you can get them to doing their budget earlier on, that'll really help them understand how to be predictable going into the next piece of life, which is owning a home and managing the risk and encouraging them as far as the next generation. Now, the most important piece when it comes to this is going to be credit. And so when you get your financial advice from social media, you're likely to end up in a lot of problems because social media isn't necessarily giving you all the great stuff to help you get there. There are some very interesting mathematical equations. Now, when it comes to credit, credit really is a mathematical equation that shows how responsible you are financially. It gives us your ability and your willingness to repay. Now, this is a big deal because that credit score plays into how your terms are going to be set when you're getting ready to buy the house. And so it's extremely important for you to understand what it is that you're getting into when it comes to credit and making sure that you help the younger generation understand how credit plays into not just their ability to buy a house, but their ability to get a really good credit card, to get a really good discount on a car, to be able to get discounts on homeowners insurance, to get discounts in other places in life. So we don't accentuate how much credit really means to people, but it's an extremely important piece in their lives. Now, they can get free credit ratings from different places, Credit Karma, Credit Wise, there's several credit apps. Experian has them out there. There's actually 16 versions of FICO. I get this question a lot. When you're getting a free version of FICO, what you're actually finding is that you're getting a promotional version of this FICO. It's a really good idea to hook them up to this sooner rather than later so that they can actually start seeing how their activities are being followed. Because the minute you start establishing credit, it literally follows you for the rest of your life. Now, there's only so much that shows up on a credit report. But with the younger crowd, if they make some mistakes in their teens and in their 20s, that is going to follow them into when they're trying to buy a house. And so it's a really good idea to set them up early with some version of that, whether it's a free app or something, and guide them along the process of understanding what it is. I usually try to, you can actually pull a free credit report from annualcreditreport.com, and you can actually do that annually for free. And it's a great way to get set up and get understanding. Now, I usually, what I try to do is I try to do my own internal credit audit at the beginning of every year. And so I'm trying to go through the internal credit audit myself, and I'm encouraging my kids at the same point in time, my adult children, to do the same thing, to go in and to go do a credit audit just to make sure that everything that's on your credit report reflects what you've done this last year, what you've been reflecting the years prior. And that's extremely important because many times stuff will show up that you don't even know about, specifically with healthcare. We see, I can't tell you how many times I see the younger crowd with collections when it comes to healthcare issues and healthcare data. And it's because literally these guys, they send them one bill, and if they don't hear back from them, they don't send them another one. They don't even call them. Literally, they just put it right into collections. And that just kills their credit right away. And if it's a big enough bill, they can actually send it in and they can get a court judgment, which I've actually seen multiple times on people where they actually have a court judgment for $500 because they didn't make a $500 payment on whatever test it was that they had done medically. And so teaching them early how to manage the credit is going to be extremely important. So even if they got a free version of credit, which would be Credit Karma, Credit Wise, or one of the credit apps, that's a fantastic way to get them set up. Now, the cautionary tale with these free ones, here's a cautionary tale with the free ones. What they are designed to do, Credit Karma, for example, is designed to monitor your credit and to sell you credit. That's what their job is to do. So if they see you getting a credit application for a car, they're going to send you multitudes of people to talk to in reference to additional car loans. If they see that you're getting a card for American Express or whatever else, they're going to send you other things like that. If your credit improves, they're going to send you stuff on the new and improved credit cards that you can get. So you have to be careful when you're getting this Credit Karma to make sure that you're not setting yourself up to do that, because it's really attractive when you're in the younger generation to feel like, oh, credit, let's just go. And I did that. Okay. Who else has done that? I'm sure there's a couple of us who could actually chime in and say what happened with credit. We did it. It was there. It wasn't great. We wish we'd have done something different, because in essence, when you're buying with credit, You are promising future income to pay that off. And if you can put it into that perspective for the younger crowd, that you are promising future income for the crowd, you are in essence telling them that you're giving up next week's paycheck just to pay off this $50 thing that you bought at Target. You're promising next month's paycheck because now you got $2,000 in there and you only get paid $4,000 a month. You're promising half of next month's paycheck just to pay this off. And so if you kind of put that into perspective, that kind of helps them understand what it is they're getting into. And one of the things that we had to do to put into perspective for my adult children is okay, you like the frappa latte, cappuccino, Starbucks, $7 whatever's, okay. Just remember, you're getting paid $19 an hour. That's about half that you're going to work half of an hour just to pay off that frappa latte, cappuccino, coffee thing that you just bought. So if you start putting things into perspective with them, now the risk reward of using their credit starts showing up. And if you can start early enough with the savings plan and maybe savings bonuses, or maybe helping them understand how some of that stuff helps, it'll really get them into a place that will help you help them out. Now, the big move right now within the credit world, as far as for buying homes, and this is on the conventional side as well as on FHA, is credit scores still play a big role. They still play a huge role. 780 is exceptional. It's not likely that a younger person is going to be at a 780. 720 is the next marker. 620 is the starting line for any of the first-time homebuyer loans. So there's different places in there. Now you can buy without credit. There are programs that you can buy. I have programs to where I can help people with conventional loans and FHA loans to be able to get in with zero credit score. Now, zero credit score means no bad credit too. That means they just simply don't have any credit. We can do that. There are ways to do that, but it's generally speaking going to be better to have the younger crowd have some form of credit. Now, how do they get started? Because when they're 16, 17, that's when they really need to be starting to build this credit profile. Right? They need to start building this credit profile, but there also need to be some boundaries in this, some guardrails, so that you're not setting up the younger crowd for disaster. Because I mean, free money, right? Woo, let's charge, keep going. So how can you do that? Well, there are several ways you can do that because they're not going to get a card. They can do what's called um, a prepaid credit card. Now, most of the time, you're going to have to be either the cosigner or something like that on that card. So what you could do just to start off is make them an authorized user onto one of your accounts and cut the limit on that authorized user so they can't spend more than X. Because obviously, you don't want to run up a $5,000 bill just because they decided to go out that weekend. And so those are some ways that you can do it that you can help them. But once they get to the point where they have a little bit of a credit score, you can actually set them up so that in essence, what they can do is they can get a prepaid credit card. It's called a secured credit card. And with their money, they put $200 down and they can get a $200 limit. And then now they can start building their accounts up and they can start encouraging responsibility through that account because that $200 after 6 months, if they've made all their payments on time with this thing, they're going to refund that $200 and they're going to convert it into a permanent credit card for them. And now it's only $200, so how much problems can they get into, right? It's not a huge one, but this is where encouraging responsibility plays a big role. Because with the credit cards that they get, you just need to keep in mind that if they use over 30% of that limit, it's going to start hurting their account. It's going to start hurting their credit. And so here's what that really means is if you're got a $200 limit, 1/3 of that is literally less than $70. And so they need to keep the balance on that less than $70, and it's a good idea to pay it off every month. That way they can start building credit quickly with something like that. You don't have to carry a balance from month to month. You literally can pay it off every single month. And what I encourage people who are starting credit to do is to get a credit card out, use $20 a month, wait until the bill comes in, pay it off, and do it again the next month. and keep doing that month after month after month after month, and never let it grow past 10% or 25% of the disposable balance. And so what that means is 10% on a $200,000 credit card would mean no more than $20. So that means they go to Chipotle and they get whatever burrito it is that they want. And then after that, they wait until the bill comes in. They don't use it again the rest of that month, and then they pay it off after that. And that tends to be a really good way for them to construct their credit without risking a whole lot of life when it comes to this. And if they're still at home, you have the opportunity to be able to inject into them and encourage them with a credit responsibility. And these are some great ways to help them build up a little bit about this. Now, the reason why I share this, I'm going to share a little bit about me now, because my story is um, a little interesting when it comes to this. I got into mortgages, and most people think mortgages are a commodity, push a button, get a rate, and move on with life. I've actually built a business that's in the top 1% nationally by doing something slightly different, which is actually creating a human element to this and trying to make sure that people get the best information so that they can get really good decisions and they can have an experience where they're not getting themselves into trouble. That's how I built my business. It's constantly transparency, constantly teaching and doing high touch service, and then building trust to help them understand that these are the right moves that they need to get into. I'll tell you why I do it. The reason why I do it is I learned a lot in life with my family. My parents, we grew up very blue collar, and by blue collar, I mean we were poor. I didn't have a bed until I was like 6. And so I really did see my parents not doing the right things with credit cards. My dad and mom got us into terrible trouble with credit cards. I remember that vividly. I remember them cutting up the credit cards at the kitchen table. I remember how hard it was eating that USDA cheese. That wasn't very much fun, just so everybody knows. And going through a lot of problems with that. But I do remember that my parents did have a turning point. They bought a house. And I remember the house very, very, very vividly because it was the first time I had a bed and I had a room that I shared with my brother. I remember it distinctly. Now, what I remember even more than that is what my parents did as they were going through the process is they started learning financial freedom. And by financial freedom, what they did is they never fully got away from the credit cards until later on in life. But what they did learn is that if they accelerated their payments and they kept track of their bills and they did the things that were financially and fiscally correct, that they could accelerate their payments and they could get debt free. And what they did is they paid their house off. And then you know what they did? They went out and bought another one. And then you know what they did? They paid that one off too. And then they went and bought more. And now that my dad actually just passed away last fall, and my mom is in her mid 80s, and she's living very blue collar. All they have is Social Security and rental income from the real estate. Now, the reason why I share that is because they didn't learn a lot of these pieces. That's why this piece is so near and dear to me, because I had to learn it the hard way too from watching them and also putting the pieces together. Now, you as a parent can be the hero of the story of your children by injecting high clarity into what's going on with your children to help them understand what they need to do in order to be able to pull forward and be able to buy this home and set themselves up for long term. And that's part of one of my core values is making sure that there's transparency in the process. The next one is that what you can do with doing these activities is inject some high confidence into them so they know what steps they need to take so that they can start making these steps and making them correctly so that they can set themselves up for long-term success, not just as homeowners, but successful in life and successful as long-term ownership, whether it's one property or multiple properties. And then the last thing that you can do by doing this is that you can set them up for high care. Oh, that just fast forwarded too far. A little too far right there. All right. You can set yourself up for really helping them with the care that they need in order to be able to get them set up for success. And this is something that anybody can do, and that these are very simple steps, but they're not always intuitive. Now, the next thing that we need to talk about with them is going to be income. and getting set up for them to buy is it really is about the how much house they can afford is all about the income. Now, let's go back to the first home that you owned. Just kind of go back and think about that in your mind. What were some of the things that were in your mind when you crossed the threshold of that first house? It was pretty important, wasn't it? You had ownership. You felt like something happened. You were super proud of your achievement. I had that same ownership feeling walking into a house with no windows, no doors. I had that same ownership feeling. It was fantastic for me, but I had to come up with a means to be able to buy the home. And I went and bought what I could afford at that point in time. It was a $43,000 house with no windows and no doors. Now, as far as income is concerned, back at that point in time, I wasn't making a ton of money. I was just working. I was working in a lumber yard as a customer service associate in sales, and that's what I was doing. Now, as far as income is concerned, the younger generation is at the point where there is some strain on housing prices. Now, it's not everywhere. Virginia is at the top of that strain. There's no doubt about that. Some areas in other states that I serve are at the top of that strain as well. But there are states that still have homes under $100,000 where you can buy them and they're actually in really, really good shape. And with the work from home thing that's happening right now with a lot of people, it's possible that they may have to move out of state if they can't afford a home in this state in order to be able to take advantage of the homeownership dream. One of the states that I serve is Indiana. And in Indiana, you can actually buy a home. I've seen people buy homes for under 75,000 that were fantastic looking homes. And I would say that it's certainly something that is in the work from home age that we're in, that could be a fantastic way for them to get into the door. Now, helping them understand what to do, and if you want them to stay closer to home, then now all of a sudden we have to talk about how can you inject yourself into their ability to be able to help this work, because we're going to look at their income no different whether they're a first-time home buyer than if we're looking at the income of somebody who's bought 20 homes again. We have to prove the ability and the willingness to repay the loan. So we're going to look at self-employment. We're going to look at commission. There's a continuum. The more risk that the continuum has, the more of a time frame we have to look at. The less risk in the continuum, the less time we have. Like, for example, just this night, this lady called Kelsey. She's trying to buy her first home. She was working at a car parts store doing accounting. She was making $50,000 a year. And she called me all excited because she just got a new job where she's literally going to be going from $50,000 a year up to $75,000 a year, which is tremendous. I remember thinking, holy cow, if I ever made 75 a year, I would feel like I'm just doing an amazing thing. Now, having said that, what ended up going on with all this is that in her case, she was now able to afford a whole lot more, and it was 100% salary, so we could use it right away. Whereas if we were trying to go with overtime or going with some of these other things, it would have taken a little bit longer because we had to see that continuum of time. Now, where can you help as looking at the next generation? Well, you can help them with things like kind of what I did with one of my kids. Um, is that I had to, in essence, go ahead and I had to create a situation with one of my kids where he was self-employed, in essence, and he was trying to buy a house. And I, in essence, had to go ahead and find a way to help him get into this house. So what did I do is I helped him with co-signing because he made the money, but he just couldn't qualify because of the timeline that he had been self-employed. So I went ahead and co-signed for him in order to be able to help him get in the door. Now, as a co-signer, there are risks associated with being a co-signer because if he misses a payment, it hits me just as hard as it hits him. And so I had to make sure that I had that conversation with my son saying, hey, son, if you ever get to the point where you can't make the payment or you can only make a partial payment, you need to let me know because I don't want that affecting my credit either. And so we had a really good conversation back and forth. Now, in the case of what I did for him, is I chose to co-sign, but not to go on title for him. So in other words, what he could do very easily is later he could refinance if he wanted to, or he could sell the property and not even have to involve me when it came to a signature. And the best thing about it is the way the mortgage laws or the mortgage piece works because I'm just a co-signer, after 12 months of him making 12 faithful payments, I don't even have to include his piece on my debt. In other words, it's not even part of my debt at that point in time. And so if I needed to move or I needed to buy another house or I needed to do something else, it doesn't affect me negatively. So in the cases of income, many times that's a really good way to be able to help them out. But I've also seen people do things like, for example, when it comes to income, like grandpa, I've seen grandpa co-sign for the grandson. They had the same conversation. It worked out. So it doesn't necessarily have to be dad. It can be a variety of people that are helping out. Now, another place that works with this, and I'm gonna get on a little bit of a rabbit trail here for just a second, is really going to come down to how which type of home it is that you're trying to sell. So if for example they're trying to buy a home from a family member, which we have had that in the past as well, now, all of a sudden, it can be slightly different because the next piece that we're talking about, which is going to come down to assets or the big cheddar, is how do we get the savings necessary to be able to pull this off? Now, if you're buying from family, there is a provision specifically designed for family where you can do what's called the gift of equity. And this is a tremendous transaction. So if grandpa is selling the son to the grandson or to the granddaughter, which actually I have one of those going on right now. Grandpa wants to sell the son to the house to the granddaughter. And the home is worth 350, but he only owes 187 and he only wants 200. There's $150,000 worth of equity there. And in that $150,000 worth of equity, in essence, he is being gifted that 150,000, which then the granddaughter can use as her down payment and can use as her closing costs. So there's no cash transacted on this. There's no need for savings. There's no need for down payment. Okay. Now, if they're not going down that path, there's a variety of ways that we can help them get set up for this. Obviously, they need to save as much as they can. This is a really important transaction, and that's a really big piece. But you can use checking, savings, 401ks. For some reason, the kids love crypto. So if they have crypto, there is a way to cash in the crypto and use that towards this as well. But there are other ways to do this as well. There are down payment assistance programs. That's actually how I bought my first house, is with a down payment assistance program. I got 100% financing. It financed 100% of the purchase price of the home. And in essence, all I had to do was come up with the cash for the closing costs. Now, the beauty of that is that I negotiated that. I mean, it didn't have any windows, didn't have any doors. There wasn't a rush on this house. I negotiated that with the seller, and the seller paid for most of my closing costs. So I actually got in the door for less than $2,000. It was a fantastic way to get in. There are other programs that you can get into as well. So there's down payment assistance. There are grants. Certain people in certain areas, there are grants that they can get into there's a general grant for the general public. But if your person is in some form of what they call community partners, now there are bigger grants that they can take advantage of as well. $10,000. If you combine it with the other one, I just did one for a teacher, and he was making $75,000 a year. And in essence, with the teacher, he bought a home at 350, and I was able to get him about $18,000 to $19,000 worth of grants to help him cut back on how much cash he needed to get into the house. So that's a fantastic way to get set up with this. If you're buying a home that needs a little love and lipstick, like if you go to a HUD home store and it's in decent enough shape for you to move into, the HUD home store does have programs with $100 down. And so if the home is actually in really good place, you can do a $100 down FHA loan and actually buy the home and move into it that way. I've done several programs that way as well. The other way to get some help for down payment or the assets that they need would either be through, if grandpa maybe or one of the grandparents is given savings bonds, those can be used as well. But gifts from family members is also, that's actually one of the hottest places that we see. Now, it doesn't have to be a lot of money. It can be $1,000, it can be $2,000, it can be a little bit here, a little bit there. But those types of gifts really make up a big deal when it comes to this. Another source that we're really seeing that a lot of the younger crowd is using is more of the crowdsourcing. Now, by crowdsourcing, what I mean is this, is they're setting up like a Venmo account or a Cash App account with a QR code so that at birthday parties, christenings, weddings, you name it, okay? They're using these so that people can help them towards whatever it is. And it can be 25 bucks, it can be 100 bucks, it can be 1,000 bucks. We really see these being popular, especially at weddings, where actually people are putting them on the reception tables or they're putting them in other places. It's a fantastic way for them to get some of the assets that they need, and those can go straight into a separate account that can be held there so that they can go ahead and buy a home with those funds or use that towards a down payment. Now, there is a seasoning requirement with that. And that what that means is it has to be in the account after the last transaction for a period of time. Usually that's 2 to 3 months. But if that's the case, then that works entirely fine that way as well. Okay. So that's fantastic with that. With as far as loan types, these are really the loan types that we see the most commonly being used when coming to buy a home. There are really you can see here that there's government and then there's FHA, VA, USDA, and the bond loans. Those are all what we call government loans, and then there's conventional loans. Conventional loans tend to be the ones that have the best terms, but I'm going to tell you those are a little harder to qualify for typically for the first time home buyer. And so we're seeing most commonly where buyers are using any of the government loans to get in because they tend to be a little bit more flexible. The FHA is the most versatile. The VA is not for Virginia, that's for veterans. That's pretty much any veteran who's worked in the has a clean discharge or is currently in active duty. USDA is more for like the rural areas. So if you're trying to move into more rural settings, that one's very specifically towards that. That's 100% financing usually with USDA. And then the bond loan that you're seeing down there can be added to any of the FHA or VA loans. FHA, USDA, VA, and that bond is in essence done like through a community place. And with a community place, what that means is that in essence, they can add it in there and they can create a down payment assistance through the bond, which Virginia Housing has one, Florida has one, Indiana has, pretty much every state has one of that nature. Long term, though, they're really going to want to get set up with some form of conventional financing. Now, I have been going very, very fast here. And so I'm going to open up the floor. You just unmute yourself if you do have some questions. And if you want to go ahead and ask them, I see we have some Spanish speakers here. So if you prefer the Spanish, I can do that as well. Todavía me defiendo completamente y puedo ayudarles con eso también. So if you prefer Spanish or if you prefer English, please let me know. And I certainly can answer your question, either one of those. Any questions so far on any?
Prefiero en español.
Prefiero español. Eso lo vi. Ajá. Okay. ¿Tienes preguntas? You have any questions?
Sí, ahí estuve entendiendo lo que estuviste explicando de que hay que mantener el crédito. ¿Recuerdas que te envié por WhatsApp la información de quería ver si se podía refinanciar la casa, qué podíamos hacer en mi caso, de lo tanto que me había subido el pago del mortgage?
Sí, 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 me acuerdo. Y bueno, vamos a hablar específicamente sobre eso después, ¿ok?
Ok,
Para no poner tu información personal aquí. ¿Ok?
espero aquí, está bien, gracias.
Okay. All right. Any other questions related to what we just got done sharing or talking about? Otherwise, we're gonna move into the next section here about the steps for the home search and how to set them up for that. No, all good, all good. All right, fantastic. If you do, don't hesitate. We can jump back into this. Now, steps to buying a home. So the home is actually going to be extremely important for you to kind of consider how it is that you're doing this, especially for the first time home buyer. When I bought my home, my first home, I'll just kind of share how that went. It was I liked the really nice parts of town. I'm not going to hide that fact. But I did realize as well that financially I was probably going to be a little bit better suited to be buying a little bit more out of town so that I could actually maximize my dollar and that I could use that home as a stepping stone. Now, when I bought my home, like I shared earlier, I bought the home with a very low price. It didn't have a whole lot of fixtures in it, like no windows and no doors, which isn't ideal, by the way. And I had to fix it up. So I went ahead and I fixed it up, and that home ended up being a stepping stone for me. I bought it at 43,000, and then I turned around a couple years later, and I didn't double my money, but I am going to tell you that I made a fair amount of money off of it so that I could in essence, go forward, pay off some debt, and be able to move into the next home very easily and smoothly. Because now I wasn't operating from a cash perspective where I had to put money down. I was now operating from a perspective of being able to have equity that I could inject into the next home. Now, having said that, this is where you really have to get to know your market and you really have to get to know where you're willing to go with this home. Location is always going to be the most important thing when it comes to this, and you need to kind of pick based off of the demographics of what you're looking for, kind of how to set yourself up for this next home. And understanding that the first home is not likely going to be the forever home, but you need to look at this house strategically. And by strategically, here's what I mean. What is the role that this home is going to play in your financial future? If this home is going to play a role of a stepping stone, then maybe getting something that needs a little love and lipstick is not a bad idea. And getting something that with a little bit of room for you to put your personalized flair on it and turn it into your own little Pinterest board might make sense. That's actually not a bad idea. Now, if your long-term goal is to have a rental portfolio, then that's a slightly different analysis because now you need to be setting yourself up for understanding where you're buying this home so that you can get people to rent it when you're done. And those are not entirely different strategies, but they're different enough to where we need to be able to think through this. And this is part of what, as you know, parents or as grandparents, we need to be thinking about trying to help the younger generation think through. Because sometimes they can get so enamored with what they see on social media that they really can set themselves up for having to get that really nice Mac Daddy home that I've never had until I was almost 50. Okay. And so now all of a sudden you start seeing some of those pieces and helping them understand what are some of the negotiables and non-negotiables that they have to have in these homes. Because sometimes a little bit of clarity from family really does go a long ways. And if you look at it from the standpoint of whether this is going to be a stepping stone or this is going to be an investment home, that really does help clarify how you're going to treat it as you're making the renovations on the house. Because if I knew back then what I know now, I never would have sold a house. Never would have sold a house because that same house that I sold, my first house, has more than quadrupled in price in the time. And I went back and looked at it. It's more than quadrupled in price. It's actually more than quintupled in price. And I don't even know what the next tuple is on top of that to say it's more than six times that. And so there's a lot of value that goes into this, but you have to think through the strategy of how you're going to get it set up. Because the next thing is coming down to steps of negotiation. And you need to realize that as you're getting into the steps of negotiation, this home is not yours yet, so don't get emotionally attached to it. Don't move in yet emotionally into the house until after you have the keys. And that's really a statement for helping the next generation think through it, because some of them I've seen them go into homes and really put all their eggs in that basket, and then find only to find out that they lost it against a bigger competitor. Now, one of the things that you need to be looking at when it comes to negotiations is we're actually putting all of our clients now through 5 steps to win. These 5 steps to win are extremely important because if they follow all 5 steps, even if they don't have a big down payment, we're actually seeing that they have a high level of success going into this. And not only that, but we're seeing that their experience, the user experience from the clients, is actually turning out to be a very positive one, to where they're actually referring us their friends. And so this is actually extremely important to get them set up correctly and understanding that the step for negotiation, the first step, is really getting the application done, getting the documents in, and finishing the pre-approval. And then having the strategy meeting so that you can understand what it is that you're buying, what your parameters are, and make sure that you're being strategic beyond price and you're being strategic well beyond the emotional side and looking for the win-win when it comes to buying this house. And I would say that if you go through that piece with that, you're going to find that it is going to be very, very advantageous for you, and you're going to have a much better outcome as far as with the younger crowd because they're not going to get discouraged as easily, and they're going to be set up for success long term for buying this. And so, being strategic from the beginning is extremely important. Looking at it from beyond price, what can you fix? What can you not fix? What is something that is negotiable, non-negotiable? Now, when you get into defining the deal, you have to look at the deal from the standpoint of what are my total costs? What are the costs that I need to put in? And what other inspections am I going to have along the way? And what could possibly go wrong in the short term or in the long term with this home? And so understanding that helps you negotiate your outcomes a little bit better and knowing what you're going to do in order to be able to get set up to buy this home. Now, as far as negotiations, you have to decide if you're going to use a real estate agent or if you're going to go at this by yourself. There are some very distinct steps that you need to look at if you're going to go at this by yourself versus if you're going to do this with a real estate agent. Now, I do have a white paper on this that I put together that could actually help you think through this if you are planning on doing it by yourself, but there is a lot of risk, and a very good agent will actually pay for themselves. And so it's actually worth your time to possibly consider using a very good agent. But if you really do think that you want to try this on your own, I certainly can give you a list of items to kind of think through when it comes to that. Now, when you're getting ready to submit your offer on this, the cleaner your offer is, the better off you're going to be. And what I mean by that is the seller is always going to be looking for the most important thing to them, which is net. What are they going to be netting on the sale of the home? And the reason why this is important is you've got to realize, let's just kind of put some math together. I'm going to pull out this calculator right here. I hope you can see it on your screen. And I'm just going to go through some basic math real quick on what the seller is encountering. If you're looking at, let's just call it a $300,000 house just for using round numbers. The seller in this case has to pay their agent who is representing them. So that's a 3% charge. So that means that that's $9,000 that the seller is giving up in order to be able to get somebody to represent them. Okay. Now, if you're not in a competitive situation, the more competition there is, the harder it's going to be for this. But you are responsible for paying for your agent. Now, having said that, and right now we're actually seeing most sellers still paying for the real estate agent, depending on how much competition there is. Okay. So if the seller is paying for the agent for the buyer, that means that this 9,000 is times two, which means they're now paying $18,000 out of 300. Now, if you're asking for some closing costs on top of that, let's say you're asking for about $7,000 in closing costs, that means that you're really taking $25,000 off of the purchase price. And let's say they owe 225, now all of a sudden they're really not making out of the 200 and or 25,000, let's see, 300 minus 25,000 minus 225, you can see that they're not making that much on the house and they're going to have a harder time going into the next house. So you have to be very strategic about how you're going to be asking for some of these things, especially in a competitive situation. Now, the reason why this is important is because the Richmond market has been named the most competitive real estate market in the United States. And so that means that you are likely going to be seeing competition when you go out there. Now, not all parts of town are like that. Not all parts of town are like that. This is where you would have to lean on your real estate agent. I know numbers. I don't know the areas of town, but I do know that if you're trying to buy in the museum district, you probably need to expect that you're going to be paying a lot more than what that list price is. Now, when the homes are being listed on the market, what we are finding right now, and this is just a market update, is we're actually finding that the listing agent is usually listing the property slightly low. Now, I can say that because I only get to see the winning contracts. And so I see what happens and what comes in after the winning contract has been ratified and we've turned it into a loan. So the winning contracts, what we see is that their listing agent is pricing it low to get as much attention as possible out in the market. It's because if they can get three or four people competing against each other for the same house, it's very likely that somebody is going to be very emotionally attached, like I'm telling you not to be, and they're going to start offering more than what's happening in the market. Now, they can run that number up, but also you have to look at it from the standpoint of what is the true value of this home. Because if it's listed at 300, but your real estate agent that you hired to help you tells you that this home could appraise between 310 and 315, that means that it's very likely that if you offer 300, you're not going to get the house because somebody else's agent is probably going to tell them that, hey, it could appraise for 315, and if you offer less than 315, it's not likely you're going to get it. And so now you have to think about it from the standpoint of how much competition you're facing and what is the effect of this auction that you may be getting because of how they're pricing this out. And so these are where a very competent real estate agent can actually make a huge difference when it comes to making the negotiations work. Because it's not just a negotiation for finding the house, it's not just a negotiation for the purchase price, it's the well and septic, the home inspection, the home warranty, the condition, several other things that have to happen along the way. If the appraisal comes in low, there are other things that negotiations that do come into this. Now, there are several places where that can happen. Now, let's talk about the next step because these are all places that you need to be thinking about when you're dealing with the negotiations, and helping your younger crowd out with this is actually going to be extremely important. Now, the steps to buying the home and getting the keys are pretty clear. Once you've negotiated a general outcome and now you're under contract on this house, now what we have to do is we have to get the inspections. Now we have to get the appraisal. We have to finish the loan. If you've gone through our 5 steps to win, we've already pre-underwritten you. And so you're completely ready to be able to go ahead and to be able to buy this house very cleanly and get it transferred. We want to make sure, especially with a younger crowd, because they don't have the money to compete with cash. We are trying really hard to underwrite every single file we're doing. And the reason is because when they go out and they present their offer and they're fully underwritten and their competition is not, we have eliminated the competition by showing that these guys are much stronger offer than the competition is. Okay. And it really helps them. We've seen a high success rate with people offering and winning these deals. Now, once you get into contract on that, you have to complete the loan. We can complete it in 2 weeks. But there are several other people that get involved in this process. There's the title company, there's the homeowner's insurance, there's the inspector. There's several other things that you have to do in order to be able to get this done. Once you get to the point to where you have the loan going and the title company and the realtor are going to start helping with some of those pieces, we come back into the mix to help you get the loan done at a very high level. Now, once everything is clear to close, then what we're going to do is we have the closing date that's in the contract. We're going to set it up so that you can show up on time and do the closing. Now, a lot of the closing is done electronically these days, so you can close most of it at home, but the title, the deed, and the deed of trust, those have to be manually signed. So you'll be signing up. You'll have to be going into the title company, usually for 15 to 20 minutes. You'll wire your funds ahead of time. You'll bring your photo ID in, and then you'll sign whatever packages you need to, and then you'll be done at that point. It's a pretty simple process. If you own a home, you've probably been through it already once. Now, I know I've pretty much simplified this in the last 45 minutes that we've been talking here, but there's a lot more to this. And you can actually find this, a lot of resources right on my website. So if you were to come in here and actually go to my website, which is theparksmortgagegroup.com, and then you come in here to resources right here, you not only can you calculate monthly payments or set yourself up for rate watch if you want to refinance, but you can actually download this resource right here where it will actually give you a lot of beneficial information that they can start processing with and thinking through in order to help them with the move. So this is all free. It's a great resource. You can find it right there on that QR code if you want to take it with you, or just remember parksmortgagegroup.com. Now, after you have the keys, this is actually pretty important for the younger generation to know, is that you're not done with the house. You have to make sure that you've managed your finances well enough. And if you've done a great job of helping the younger crowd understand budgeting, and if you help them understand how to manage their credit and how to manage their assets, managing the home is actually going to be fairly easy. There are going to be things that they're going to need, like my big thing I forgot all about was the lawnmower. And yeah, I forgot the lawnmower. So I had to borrow one for the first time when I had to cut the grass. But there are things that they're going to need when they come into making that work. Getting a list of trades like painters or plumbers or HVAC technicians or other things like that, that's going to be important for them to know and be able to get set up for managing this. Now, let's deal with some of the information here on the market update right now, because market right now is really big, and I'm just going to put it out there as far as starting off with the most important one, realtor or no realtor. I'm going to tell you that a really good realtor is worth their weight and they're worth their payment. If you get a really bad one, you're paying the same amount for them, but you're just going to get a terrible experience. And so I would encourage you, if you are going to consider a realtor, realtors do a very good job at helping you negotiate and navigate. And if you can get the seller to pay for it, it's entirely worth your time to do it. Ever since the situation with the lawsuit against the Association of Realtors. They changed it to where now you are obligated to pay. You were always obligated to pay. It just so happens that now they made it very, very, very transparently clear that it's on you. Now, as far as commission levels for real estate agents, because real estate agents are the most expensive part of this transaction. But you need to know exactly what it is that you're working with here, because like I said, a really good one earns their keep, completely earns their keep. Rates for these can be anywhere from, statistically, we've seen anywhere from 2.5% to 3% for them to represent you. And so that's statistically really gonna kind of consider where you want to go, because all of that stuff is stuff that you want to negotiate with them. However, if you out negotiate them on their commission, I'm going to tell you, you need a different real estate agent. I'm just going to tell you that, because a really good realtor, you're paying them for their ability to negotiate for you. That's really what you're paying them for. Okay, so it's worth your time to get that. Now, demographically speaking, we need to talk about what's happening in the market right now. And what you're going to be seeing in the market right now is that there is a lot of pent-up demand, a lot of pent-up demand. And demographically speaking, the Gen Z and millennials are actually a bigger ball in the python demographically than boomers and Gen X. They're just a much bigger ball in the python. And they are finally at the point where they are now coming into the market and they are doing family formations. And the anticipation is as the rates begin to fall, you're going to see more people enter into the marketplace because of perceived affordability. And so the forecast is if the rates were to drop by 1 percentage point right now, you would see an additional 10 million buyers come back into the market, which would increase your competition tremendously because there's just not enough inventory as it is. So what does that mean? Well, obviously you kind of need to think through affordability, because if that many people come back in and demand is high and inventory is low, prices are going to go right back up. So right now, interest rates, even though they are slightly high, they are actually your best friend. They're your best friend because they are keeping the market at bay, and you can just lock in a home right now. And at some point in time, what you can do is you can turn around and you can refinance to better your situation over time. That's a strategy you need to be thinking about. Get in with a really good real estate agent, get hooked up with them, get out, get a strategy together so that you can make it work and start going out there. Now, the way the rates are working and where the forecast is right now, this is a really important piece to understand, is rates are usually driven by inflation. Inflation has been hovering between 2.6 and 2.7 lately, which is still better than where it was. It used to be closer to 5%. So we're closer to 2.6, 2.7. Now, the way it usually works is it's inflation plus 3% equals the rate. So that means that at 2.7 plus 3%, we should be at 5.7 roughly as far as an interest rate. But we're not. We're at 6.5, 6.25, depending on the loan. 6% possibly, depending on the loan type. So that means that we're sitting here with a slightly elevated interest rate, lower inventory, but this too shall change at some point in time. Now, the Fed is in a little bit of an adversarial relationship right now with the current administration. I'm not smart enough to really know who is the right person in this, but the rates are high compared to where inflation is. And so it's really hard to say what's going to happen or how it's going to happen. But the Fed chair is being replaced in April. Now, if everything holds and they get installed in May, this new person may react very differently than the one who's currently in there now. Now, that could mean that we could see rates drop. It could mean that they hold steady. I really don't know. But the forecast by the end of this year is that we're going to be in the high to mid fives when it comes to interest rates. So that's a good 0.5%, possibly lower than where we're at right now. So it's possibly worth your time to consider if you are considering doing something. It would be a really good idea to actually do it sooner rather than later, just because of that. So if you can help your group of people, now is really the time to get them prepared so that they can be out in front of the market sooner rather than later. Now, I have a lot more resources that you can actually pull from. I actually have a YouTube channel. This will actually end up on the YouTube channel later on tonight. And so if you do want to follow some of the stuff that I share, I'm certainly happy. You just jump in there and join us on the YouTube channel, and you can see all of that stuff as soon as it hits. As I wrap up today, I do want to share with you how I work. I work very differently than most. I shared some of my core values earlier of how I work with transparency and high touch and high trust, trying to build those with each and every client by showing them exactly how to get where they go. I work primarily by referral. And there's a reason why, is that I don't like making cold calls. I like providing value like this, where I can help people, buy a home, refinance a home, and build wealth through real estate. And so this allows me to focus more of my time on helping clients build wealth, better their payments, and buy a next home if they follow the plan that I have in place. So I covet your referrals, and I work primarily by that because I devote myself to you guys before, during, and after each call. And if I've earned your trust, I'd love the opportunity to serve you and yours. And really, that's it. Thank you so much for joining tonight. Are there any questions that you might have related to anything that I've said? There's a list of resources, and the QR code that you're seeing right here is if you want to set an appointment with me, you can go ahead and snap a photo of that, and I'm certainly happy to meet with you and have anything like that. Any questions tonight? No. Okay. Either I did tremendously well or I did terribly bad, and everybody's falling asleep in the process. So,
No, you did great.
did I?
No, it was very informative.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So you know how to get a hold of me. I'm more than happy to serve and more than happy to help. Please let me know. I'm going to let everybody get back to their evenings, and certainly happy to serve you when the time is right or when you have the need. Okay.
Thank you. Got
Thank
it
you.
here.
All
Have a
right.
good night.
Bye.
Bye
Thank you
bye.
as always. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Andrea, I'll call you later, okay? I know I owe you some information. Edgar, te llamo después también, ¿ok? Mañana si está
Está
bien.
bien.
Sí, está bien, te llamo mañana.
Bye,
Ok,
Chris.
listo.
Bye bye.